I remember the launch party clearly. The room was bright and filled with laughter. Clara and I had worked hard to get here. We built this startup from the ground up. It was our dream. We created a unique product, and the excitement in the air was palpable. People were eager to see what we had made. As I stood by the snack table, I felt proud. Clara walked to the front of the room. She smiled and waved. I felt happy for her. Then she announced that Tom would be the new CEO. My heart sank. I thought she would at least mention me. After all, I was a co-founder. I had put in long hours and made sacrifices. But she didn't look at me. She seemed focused on Tom and the future. I felt a lump in my throat. I wanted to applaud, but my hands felt heavy. The crowd cheered for Tom, but I felt lost. It felt like a betrayal. Clara had taken the lead without discussing it with me. After the announcement, I tried to talk to Clara. I pulled her aside, away from the crowd. I told her I was surprised by the choice. I reminded her that I owned the trademark for our product. She shrugged and said it was a family company now. I felt the anger rise in me. How could she ignore my work? She dismissed my concerns. I wanted to scream that I deserved recognition. Instead, I felt small. I had always supported her dreams. Now, it seemed she had forgotten mine. When I left the party, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I was confused about what to do next. I drove home, replaying the night in my mind. I thought about all the late nights we spent working. I thought about the risks we took to start this business. I had put everything into this company, and now I felt pushed aside. As I sat in my living room, I took out my laptop. I opened the trademark documents. It was clear. The name and logo were mine. I had filed the paperwork long before we launched. I saw my signature and the date. The reality hit me hard. I had the legal right to the trademark, but what good was it if I did not use it? I worried about the future of my business. Clara and Tom were planning to expand. I knew my trademark would be key in their plans. If they moved forward without me, I could lose everything. I decided I needed to get serious. I needed to protect what was mine. The next day, I called a lawyer. I explained my situation. He listened carefully. He told me that I had a strong case, but warned me about the risks of a legal battle. It could get messy, and it could hurt my relationship with Clara. I took a deep breath. I had to think this through. I had always wanted what was best for the company, but I also needed to stand up for myself. I started to gather documents. I wrote down everything I could remember about our agreements and our plans. I also began to network. I reached out to some industry contacts for advice. I wanted to understand my options better. I felt a fire inside me. I was determined to reclaim my place in the company. A few days later, I heard about a major partnership Clara and Tom were pursuing. I felt a knot in my stomach. They were moving forward without me. I knew they needed my trademark for the deal. I had to act fast. Then I got a call from Tom. He said they needed me at a meeting to discuss the partnership. I hesitated. I felt torn. Part of me wanted to refuse. Tom had been dismissive of my work, but another part of me knew I had to go. I had to assert my rights. As the day of the meeting approached, I thought about happier times with Clara. I remembered when we dreamed about our business together. I wanted that dream to be shared, not taken away. I decided I would attend the meeting. I would make it clear that I owned the trademark. The day of the meeting arrived. I walked into the office feeling nervous but determined. Clara and Tom were there, looking confident. I took a deep breath and sat down. I was ready to speak up. The room was tense. Clara started discussing the partnership with excitement. I listened carefully. Then I spoke up. I told them I needed to discuss the trademark. They turned to me, surprised. I explained my ownership and the legal implications of their actions. The tension in the room grew. Tom tried to downplay my contribution. I felt my heart race. I stood my ground, explaining why I deserved recognition. I could feel the heat of the argument rising. At that moment, I realized I was not just fighting for a name. I was fighting for my place and my worth. As the meeting continued, I saw Tom's confidence start to shake. I felt a sense of power. I was no longer the sidelined sister. I was reclaiming my voice. I knew this was just the beginning. The battle for my trademark and my place in the company had only just begun. After the meeting, I felt a mix of emotions. I had stood my ground, but the tension between us was thick. I left the office with my heart pounding. I was angry and hurt, but I also felt a sense of determination. I knew I had to face Clara again, but I wasn't sure how. The next day, I decided to confront Clara. I invited her to meet at a coffee shop. I hoped we could talk things through. As I waited for her, I felt nervous. I remembered all the times we had laughed together, the late nights working on our startup. I wanted to save that bond, but I also knew I had to protect myself. When Clara arrived, she looked anxious. I could see she had been affected by the meeting. We sat down and ordered our coffees. The silence was heavy. I took a deep breath and spoke first. I told her how I felt. I explained that I was hurt by her decision to make Tom the CEO without talking to me. I reminded her of my hard work and my ownership of the trademark. Clara listened but didn't respond right away. I could see she was thinking, then she finally spoke. She said this was a family business now. She claimed that I should trust her and Tom to lead. I felt my anger rise. How could she dismiss my role so easily? I reminded her that I had built this company with her. I had worked just as hard, if not harder. Our conversation escalated. Clara raised her voice, saying I was being selfish. I couldn't believe her words. I told her that I wasn't trying to be selfish. I was trying to protect what we had built. We were sisters, but we were also business partners. The argument grew more intense. Old wounds surfaced. We spoke about our childhood, about how we had always been competitive. I felt like we were losing sight of what mattered. I wanted to resolve this, not make it worse. Finally, Clara dismissed my concerns again. She said I was overreacting and that everything would be fine. I stood up, feeling defeated. I realized she didn't see me as an equal partner. I left the coffee shop with a heavy heart. I felt lost and alone. As I drove home, I thought about our conversation. I had to take action. I couldn't let Clara and Tom push me aside. I needed to document everything related to the trademark and the company's plans. I grabbed my laptop and started writing. I listed all the agreements we had made. I noted down every conversation about the business. I wanted to be prepared. I felt a sense of control as I typed. I wasn't going to let them erase my contributions. Over the next few days, I focused on gathering information. I looked through emails, contracts, and meeting notes. I wanted to create a clear timeline of our work together. I also reached out to my lawyer again. I wanted to make sure I understood my rights. He advised me to be cautious. He warned that taking legal action could strain my relationship with Clara. I understood, but I felt I had no choice. I had to protect myself and my trademark. I couldn't let my sister's decisions ruin everything we had built. As I worked, I felt a new sense of purpose. I began to network within the industry. I reached out to contacts who had been supportive in the past. I explained my situation and sought advice. Some were shocked to hear about the partnership without me. Others offered help and insights. Then I learned about Clara and Tom's plans for a major launch. They were moving forward quickly, and I felt panic rise in me. I knew that if they launched without me, I could lose everything. I decided I had to act fast. I returned to my lawyer, ready to take the next step. I wanted to ensure my trademark was protected before they made any moves. We discussed the possibility of sending a letter to Clara and Tom, asserting my ownership and my rights. As I prepared the letter, I felt a mix of fear and empowerment. I knew this was a critical moment. I had to make it clear that I would not be sidelined. I wanted them to understand that I was serious about my claims. On the day I sent the letter, I felt anxious. I wondered how Clara would react. I hoped it wouldn't lead to more conflict, but I knew I had to stand firm. I could not let fear hold me back. Days passed, and I waited for a response. I felt restless. I checked my email constantly, hoping for some sign. Then, finally, I received a message from Tom. He asked to meet. I felt a mix of dread and hope. I agreed, knowing this could be a turning point. As the day of the meeting approached, I thought about what I would say. I needed to be clear about my ownership and my intentions. I wanted to explain why I believed my role was crucial. I also wanted to hear what they had to say. When the meeting day arrived, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was ready to fight for my place. I walked into the office, determined to assert my rights. I was ready to reclaim what was mine. I would not be pushed aside any longer. The day of the meeting arrived. I walked into the office, my heart racing. Tom was already there, waiting for me. His expression was serious. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of my purpose. I was there to reclaim my rights and protect my trademark. Tom greeted me with a nod. He seemed tense. I could sense the pressure in the room. I sat down and looked him in the eye. I needed him to understand that I was not backing down. I started by stating my ownership of the trademark clearly. I explained the legal implications of their actions. I wanted Tom to know that I was serious. He listened, but didn't look happy. I could see he was trying to think of a way to respond. After a moment, he spoke. He tried to downplay my concerns. He said the partnership with Clara was essential for growth. I felt my frustration rise. I reminded him that without the trademark, the partnership would not be possible. I pointed out that I was the only one who could finalize deals related to our product. Tom frowned. He started talking about the company's future, trying to convince me that I should let them lead. I felt my anger boil over. I told him that my hard work deserved respect. He needed to recognize my contributions. The conversation turned heated. Tom raised his voice, claiming I was being unreasonable. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I stood my ground, explaining that I was not just a sister, I was a co-founder. I had every right to be part of these discussions. As we argued, I tried to stay calm. I didn't want to let my emotions take over. I needed to make my point clearly. I reminded him of the late nights and sacrifices I had made for this company. I wanted him to see how much this meant to me. Finally, Tom seemed to understand the stakes. He looked at me with a mix of frustration and respect. He knew I was serious about this. I could see he was starting to reconsider his approach. After a long pause, Tom shifted the conversation. He suggested that we could work together to find a solution. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe there was a way for us to come to an agreement. I was willing to listen if he was open to compromise. I asked him what he had in mind. He proposed that I could keep my trademark, but that I should step back from daily operations. He believed it would allow Clara and him to lead without interference. I felt a wave of anger wash over me. I couldn't believe he thought I would just give up my role. I told him that stepping back was not an option. I had put in too much work to simply fade away. I explained that I wanted to be involved in the direction of the company. I wanted my voice to matter. The tension between us grew again. Tom looked frustrated, but I stood firm. I had come too far to turn back now. I needed to protect my interests and assert my rights. I could not let them take control without my input. After several rounds of back and forth, Tom finally agreed to involve me in the decision-making process. I felt a rush of relief mixed with caution. This was a small victory, but it was not enough. I needed more than just a seat at the table. I pushed further. I proposed that we establish a formal agreement that recognized my role and ownership. Tom hesitated, but I could see he was considering it. He knew that without my trademark, the partnership would be weak. Finally, he nodded. He agreed to discuss the terms with Clara. I felt a wave of satisfaction. I had made progress, but I knew the fight was not over. I needed to ensure that the agreement would be fair and that my rights would be protected. As we wrapped up the meeting, Tom seemed more composed. He told me he would talk to Clara about my role and the trademark. I left the office feeling a mix of hope and determination. I had taken a step forward, but I still had to be cautious. The following days were tense. I waited for news from Tom and Clara. I felt anxious, unsure of what their decision would be. I kept working on my documents, making sure everything was in order. I wanted to be ready for whatever came next. Then I received a call from Tom. He wanted to meet again. My heart raced as I prepared for the conversation. I had no idea what they would say. I hoped it would be good news, but I knew I had to be ready for anything. When I arrived at the office, I found Clara sitting with Tom. She looked nervous. I took a seat, and the atmosphere felt heavy. Tom started by saying they had discussed my role and my trademark. I listened closely as he explained their proposal. They wanted to recognize my ownership officially and include me in key decisions. I felt a rush of relief. This was what I had fought for. However, I noticed Clara's expression. She seemed hesitant. I knew there was more to this discussion. I pressed for details, wanting to understand their terms fully. Tom explained that they wanted to move forward with the partnership, but they would ensure I was included in key negotiations. I felt a sense of control returning. I knew I had to make sure my rights were protected in writing. As the conversation continued, I felt a sense of hope. We were starting to find common ground, but I knew I had to stay vigilant. I would not let my guard down. This was my chance to reclaim my place and ensure that my contributions were recognized. After the meeting, I felt a mix of relief and worry. Tom and Clara had agreed to recognize my ownership and include me in key decisions, but I knew I had to be careful. I didn't want to trust them too easily. A few days later, Tom called me. He wanted to set up a meeting about the partnership. I felt a wave of anxiety. Part of me wanted to refuse, but I also knew that I needed to be involved. This was my chance to regain control. The night before the meeting, I couldn't sleep. I thought about everything that had happened. I remembered how Clara and I started this company together. I wanted to believe we could move past our issues, but I felt the tension still simmering beneath the surface. The next day, I arrived at the office feeling nervous, but determined. Tom and Clara were already there, looking focused. I took a deep breath and reminded myself of my rights. I was there to assert my position. As we sat down, Tom started discussing the partnership details. He talked about the potential growth and how they wanted to move forward. I listened carefully, but I felt a sense of unease. I wanted to make sure they were not planning anything behind my back. After he finished, I spoke up. I reminded them that my trademark was crucial for the partnership. I wanted to ensure that my rights were clearly defined in any agreements we made. Clara nodded, but I could see a hint of frustration in her eyes. Tom shifted the conversation to the upcoming launch event. He spoke with excitement about the new partnership and how it would benefit the company. I felt a mix of hope and anxiety. I wanted the launch to succeed, but I needed to be included in the plans. I asked Tom how I would be involved in the launch. He hesitated and then suggested that I could help with the marketing strategy. I felt relieved, but still cautious. I wanted to make sure I had a significant role in shaping the company's direction. As we discussed the details, I noticed Clara growing more distant. She seemed frustrated with my questions. I could sense that she wanted to move forward quickly, but I had to protect my interests. I reminded them that I needed to be part of the decision-making process. After the meeting, I felt drained. I had stood my ground, but I knew I needed to keep pushing for clarity. I spent the next few days working on my marketing ideas for the launch. I wanted to show them that I could add value. Then I received a call from Tom. He wanted to discuss the launch and my ideas. I felt a mix of excitement and fear. I hoped this would be a positive conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that Clara might not be fully on board. When we met, Tom seemed more relaxed. He started by praising my ideas and how they could enhance the launch. I felt a surge of pride. I wanted to prove that I could contribute meaningfully. But then, Tom mentioned that Clara wanted to take a more hands-on role in the marketing. My heart sank. I felt the familiar tension rising. I asked Tom why Clara wanted to lead the marketing effort. He explained that she felt it was important for her to have a strong presence in the launch. I felt a mix of anger and concern. I knew Clara wanted to assert her authority, but I wasn't willing to step back. I reminded Tom that we had agreed on my involvement. He looked uncomfortable, caught between us. I decided to stand firm. I told Tom that if Clara wanted to lead, I needed to have equal input. I explained that I would not agree to a plan where my contributions were sidelined. Tom nodded, but I could see he was struggling to mediate our conflict. By the end of the meeting, I felt more determined than ever. I knew I had to assert myself. I sent an email to Tom and Clara outlining my expectations for the marketing strategy and my role in the launch. I made it clear that I wanted to be fully involved. The following days were tense. I waited for their response, feeling anxious. I knew that if they pushed back again, I would have to confront them. I was ready to fight for my place in the company, but I hoped it wouldn't come to that. Finally, I received a reply from Clara. She agreed to discuss my ideas, but insisted that she wanted to take the lead. I felt a surge of frustration. It seemed like she didn't understand the importance of collaboration. I knew I had to address this directly. I called Clara and asked to meet. I wanted to clear the air and find a way to work together. When we sat down, I felt a mix of hope and tension. I wanted to mend our relationship, but I also needed to assert my rights. I started by expressing my desire to work together. I reminded her of our shared vision and how much I valued her contributions. Clara listened, but I could see she was still defensive. As we talked, I explained how important it was for both of us to have a voice in the launch. I emphasized that our success depended on teamwork. I wanted her to understand that I was not trying to undermine her, I was trying to collaborate. Clara seemed to soften a bit. She admitted that she felt pressure to prove herself as the CEO. I told her that I understood, but reminded her that we were stronger together. I suggested that we could combine our ideas for the launch. By the end of the conversation, I felt a sense of relief. Clara agreed to let me take the lead on certain aspects of the marketing strategy. I knew we still had a long way to go, but it felt like a step in the right direction. As I left the meeting, I felt hopeful. I had stood my ground, but I had also opened the door for collaboration. I knew that the launch was critical for our company, and I was determined to make it a success. I was ready to reclaim my role and prove my worth. After my conversation with Clara, I felt a sense of cautious optimism. We had agreed to work together on the launch, and I was determined to make it a success. I spent days refining my marketing ideas, excited to share them with both Clara and Tom. As the launch date approached, the pressure began to build. I was anxious but ready to showcase my contributions. Our team worked hard, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I wanted to prove that my ideas mattered. Then, we had a team meeting to discuss the final details. Clara and Tom were animated, discussing their vision for the launch. I listened carefully, eager to share my marketing strategy. When it was my turn to speak, I presented my ideas with confidence. I outlined how we could engage our audience and create a buzz. However, as I spoke, I noticed Clara's expression change. She seemed frustrated. I continued, trying to ignore the feeling in my stomach. But when I finished, Clara jumped in. She suggested changes that seemed to undermine my ideas. I felt my heart race. Tom looked between us, sensing the tension. I took a deep breath. I reminded Clara that we had agreed to collaborate. I explained why my ideas were important and how they aligned with our brand. The room grew quiet. Clara crossed her arms and frowned. I could see she was not pleased. She argued that her vision was better and more aligned with the company's goals. I felt my frustration rise again, but I forced myself to stay calm. I asked Tom for his opinion, hoping he would support me. He hesitated, then said he saw value in both our ideas. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could find a middle ground. Clara, however, seemed determined. She insisted on her changes, claiming they would make the launch more effective. I felt my heart sink. I knew I had to stand firm. I reminded her that my ideas had worked before and would resonate with our audience. After a tense exchange, we reached a compromise. Clara would incorporate some of my ideas, but she would still lead the marketing efforts. I felt a mix of relief and frustration. I had stood my ground, but I also felt like I was still being sidelined. As the launch day approached, I worked tirelessly to prepare. I wanted everything to be perfect. I spent long hours finalizing our marketing materials and coordinating with the team. I knew I had to make the most of my role. The day of the launch arrived. The atmosphere was electric. The venue was buzzing with excitement. I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. I arrived early to help with last-minute details. I wanted everything to go smoothly. As guests started to arrive, I felt my heart race. I watched as Clara and Tom greeted people. They seemed confident, but I could feel the tension between us. I hoped that once the launch began, we could put our differences aside. When it was time to present, I took a deep breath. I stepped onto the stage, ready to share our vision. I introduced our product and highlighted its unique features. The audience listened, and I felt a wave of energy. I was in my element. As I spoke, I noticed Clara watching from the side. She seemed impressed, and I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could finally see eye to eye. I finished my presentation, and the audience erupted in applause. I felt proud of what we had accomplished. After the presentation, we mingled with guests. I received positive feedback about my ideas. I felt validated. Clara approached me, and for a moment, I saw a smile on her face. She congratulated me on a job well done. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. But then, Tom pulled me aside. He looked serious. He wanted to talk about the next steps for the partnership. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew that our discussions about the trademark were still unresolved. Tom explained that they were moving forward with the partnership, but that they wanted to finalize the details soon. He mentioned that Clara had expressed concerns about my involvement. I felt my heart race. I knew I had to address this. I reminded Tom about our agreement and the importance of my role. I explained that I had worked hard to earn my place in the company. He listened, but seemed caught in the middle. I urged him to speak with Clara about my contributions and to ensure my rights were protected. After our conversation, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I knew I had to stand firm. I wanted to make sure that my contributions were recognized and that I had a clear role moving forward. As the night went on, I felt the atmosphere shift. People were excited about our product, but I could sense the underlying tension between Clara and me. I hoped we could resolve our issues, but I knew the road ahead would be challenging. As I left the launch event, I felt a sense of accomplishment. We had successfully launched our product, but I knew that my fight was not over. I would continue to assert my rights and protect my place in the company. I was determined to find a way to work together with Clara and Tom, but I would not back down. The launch was just the beginning, and I was ready for whatever came next. After the launch, I felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty. The event had gone well, but I knew our underlying issues were still unresolved. Clara and I had to find a way to work together, but I sensed that she was still holding back. The next few days were tense. I waited for Clara and Tom to reach out about our next steps, but nothing came. I felt anxious. I knew that if we didn't address our issue soon, it could hurt the company. Finally, I decided to take action. I reached out to Tom and requested a meeting. I explained that I wanted to discuss our plans for the partnership and my role moving forward. He agreed, but I could tell he was hesitant. When the meeting day arrived, I walked into the office feeling nervous, but determined. Tom was already there looking serious. I took a seat and prepared to speak my mind. I started by expressing my concerns about the partnership. I reminded him that we had agreed to include me in key decisions. I needed to ensure that my contributions were recognized. Tom listened, but looked conflicted. Then I brought up Clara. I explained that I felt like she was still trying to assert her authority, and it was affecting our collaboration. I needed Tom to understand how important it was for us to work together as a team. Tom sighed and nodded. He admitted that he had sensed the tension between Clara and me. He said he would talk to her about it. I felt a flicker of hope, but I knew I had to keep pushing for clarity. As the days passed, I waited for news. I was eager to hear what Tom had discussed with Clara. But as time went on, I grew more anxious. I felt like I was stuck in limbo, waiting for them to make a decision. Finally, I received a call from Tom. He wanted to meet again. My heart raced as I prepared for the conversation. I hoped they had come to a resolution, but I knew I had to be ready for anything. When I arrived at the office, Tom and Clara were waiting for me. They both looked serious, and I felt a knot in my stomach. As I took a seat, I braced myself for what was to come. Tom started by saying that they had discussed my concerns. He acknowledged the tension between Clara and me. I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. I wanted to hear what they had decided. Clara spoke up. She admitted that she had been feeling pressure to prove herself as CEO. She said she realized that her actions might have come off as dismissive. I felt a glimmer of hope. It seemed like she was willing to open up. I told her that I understood her need to assert herself. I reminded her that we both wanted the same thing, to see our company succeed. I suggested that we could work together more closely, combining our strengths. Tom nodded in agreement. He encouraged us to find a way to collaborate effectively. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We were finally addressing our issues head on. As we discussed our roles, I proposed that we create a clear plan outlining each of our responsibilities. This would help us avoid misunderstandings in the future. Clara agreed, and we began brainstorming ideas. Slowly, the atmosphere in the room shifted from tense to collaborative. We started to lay out our individual strengths and how we could use them to benefit the company. I felt more hopeful than I had in weeks. However, I knew we still had work to do. I reminded them that we needed to ensure my trademark was protected in our agreements. I wanted to make sure that my contributions were recognized and valued. We spent the next hour discussing our plans. We talked about marketing strategies, product development, and how we could engage our audience. I felt excited about the direction we were heading. By the end of the meeting, we had a clear understanding of our roles. Clara would lead the marketing efforts, while I would focus on product development and strategy. I felt a sense of relief. We were finally on the same page. As I left the office, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. We had made progress, but I knew challenges would still arise. I was ready to face them head on. I wanted to ensure that I was not sidelined again. In the following weeks, I put my plan into action. I focused on developing new products and refining our offerings. I collaborated with the team, excited to see our ideas come to life. However, I noticed that Clara was still trying to assert her authority. She often made decisions without consulting me, and I felt frustrated. I knew we had agreed to collaborate, but it seemed like she was struggling to let go. One day, I approached Clara about it. I explained that I felt excluded from discussions that impacted my area of responsibility. She listened, but looked defensive. I reminded her of our agreement to communicate openly. Our conversation became heated. Clara insisted that she was just trying to move things forward. I felt my frustration boil over. I reminded her that we needed to work as a team, not compete against each other. After that conversation, I felt exhausted. I knew we had made progress, but I also knew we had a long way to go. I was determined to find a way to work together, but I needed Clara to understand the importance of collaboration. As I left the office that day, I felt a mix of determination and uncertainty. I knew the path ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to fight for my place in the company. I was prepared to stand up for myself and my contributions, no matter what it took. As the weeks passed, the tension between Clara and me continued. I felt like we were walking a tightrope, trying to balance our roles while still pushing toward success. I was determined to make this partnership work, but I also needed to protect my interests. Then, something unexpected happened. I decided it was time to go public about my trademark ownership and the ongoing struggles with Clara. I felt that it was important for the industry to know the truth about my contributions. I wanted to share my side of the story, especially since I felt like I was being sidelined. I began drafting a statement to share on social media. I wanted to explain my role in the company and how much I had invested in our brand. I felt nervous, but also empowered. This was my chance to reclaim my narrative. When I posted my statement, I felt a mix of anxiety and relief. I knew I was taking a risk, but I believed it was necessary for my integrity. I hoped it would shed light on my contributions and prompt Clara to reconsider her approach. The reactions came flooding in. Some people supported me, praising my courage to speak out. Others were shocked and confused. They wondered why there was tension between the co-founders. I felt a wave of mixed emotions as I read through the comments. Then, to my surprise, Clara reached out to me. She was furious. She accused me of airing our dirty laundry and claimed I was damaging our brand. I felt my heart race. I knew this would escalate, but I stood my ground. I explained that I was only sharing the truth and advocating for my rights. We agreed to meet to discuss the fallout. I arrived at the office feeling anxious. Clara was already there, her expression tense. I took a deep breath as I sat down. I knew this conversation would be tough, but I was ready to face her. Clara started the discussion by saying she felt betrayed. She believed I had undermined her leadership by going public. I listened carefully and tried to stay calm. I told her that I didn't want to hurt her, but I needed to stand up for myself. As we talked, I reminded her of the hard work I had put into the company. I explained that I had felt excluded and undervalued. I wanted her to understand that I was not trying to attack her. I was trying to protect my contributions. Clara listened, but still seemed defensive. She insisted that I should have come to her first instead of going public. I agreed that communication was important, but I also felt that she had not been open with me about her plans. As our conversation continued, I could see Clara starting to soften. She admitted that she had been under pressure as CEO and that it had affected her decisions. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could find common ground after all. I suggested that we work together to create a clear communication plan. This would help us avoid misunderstandings in the future. Clara seemed to consider it. She nodded and agreed to try. After our meeting, I felt a sense of relief. I knew we still had a long way to go, but it felt like we were making progress. I was determined to rebuild our trust and work toward a healthier partnership. However, it wasn't long before I faced another challenge. Tom called me one afternoon. He wanted to discuss Clara's reaction to my public statement. I felt a knot in my stomach. I wondered what he would say. When I arrived at his office, Tom looked serious. He explained that Clara felt my actions had put unnecessary pressure on the company. I listened carefully, knowing this was a critical moment. I told Tom that I had acted to protect my interests. I reminded him that my trademark was my right. I wanted him to understand that I was not trying to create conflict. I was trying to ensure my contributions were recognized. Tom nodded, but seemed torn. He said he understood my perspective, but also emphasized the importance of teamwork. I agreed, but I insisted that Clara needed to recognize my role as well. As we talked, I felt a sense of urgency. I wanted to resolve these issues before they escalated further. I suggested that we hold a team meeting to address our communication and roles openly. Tom agreed, and we set a date for the discussion. In the days leading up to the meeting, I prepared carefully. I wanted to ensure that my points were clear and that we could have a constructive conversation. I felt nervous, but also determined to make our voices heard. On the day of the meeting, I arrived early to gather my thoughts. Clara and Tom were already there looking serious. I took a deep breath and reminded myself to stay focused. As the meeting began, I laid out my concerns. I emphasized the importance of clear communication and collaboration. I wanted us to work as a united front, not as competitors. I could see Clara listening intently. Tom added his thoughts, emphasizing that we needed to support each other as co-founders. I felt a sense of hope as we discussed our roles and the importance of recognizing each other's contributions. By the end of the meeting, we had agreed to establish regular check-ins to ensure we were all on the same page. I felt relieved. It seemed like we were finally moving in the right direction. As I left the meeting, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was ready to continue advocating for my rights while fostering a more collaborative environment. I knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but I was determined to make it work. I realized that while family dynamics could complicate things, open communication was key. I was ready to embrace this new chapter and work toward a brighter future for our company. I would not let fear hold me back. I was ready to reclaim my voice and assert my place as an equal partner. After our meeting, things seemed to improve. Clara and I were making an effort to communicate better. We held regular check-ins to ensure we were on the same page. I felt hopeful, but I knew that the underlying tension was still there. I needed to be cautious. Then, one evening, Clara invited me to dinner with our family. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. I hoped this would be a chance to strengthen our bond, but I also worried about how our family dynamics would affect our conversation. As I arrived at the restaurant, the warm atmosphere eased my nerves. Our parents were already there, smiling and chatting. I felt a wave of comfort as I joined them. I wanted to put aside our work issues for the night and enjoy the moment. During dinner, our parents asked about the business. Clara spoke confidently about the launch and the partnership. I felt proud of what we had accomplished, but I also sensed that Clara was trying to assert her authority again. When it was my turn to speak, I shared my excitement about our new products and plans. I wanted to highlight my contributions, but I also felt a need to tread carefully. I didn't want to spark any tension at the table. As the dinner progressed, our parents began to ask questions about our working relationship. I could feel the tension rising. Clara answered their questions, but I could tell she was becoming defensive. I worried that the conversation would take a negative turn. After a few moments of discussion, Clara turned to me. She said she felt hurt by my public statement and how it affected our family. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew this was a sensitive topic, but I also needed to express my feelings. I calmly explained that my actions were not meant to hurt her. I reminded her that I had felt sidelined and that I needed to stand up for my rights. I wanted her to understand my perspective, but I could see her frustration growing. Our parents looked between us, sensing the tension. My father spoke up, urging us to find common ground. He reminded us that family comes first and that we needed to support each other. I appreciated his words, but I also felt the weight of our unresolved issues. Clara and I exchanged glances, and I could see her reconsidering her approach. I suggested that we focus on our shared goals and the future of the company. I wanted us to move past our disagreements and work together for the sake of our family and our business. After a moment of hesitation, Clara nodded. She admitted that she had been feeling pressure to prove herself and that it had affected her decisions. I felt a wave of empathy. I knew we both wanted the same thing, to see our company succeed. The conversation began to shift as we opened up about our feelings. We spoke about the challenges we faced and how they had impacted our relationship. I felt a sense of relief as we acknowledged our struggles. By the end of the dinner, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Claire and I had made progress in understanding each other. We agreed to continue working on our communication and supporting one another. As we left the restaurant, I felt lighter. I knew we still had work to do, but I was determined to keep our lines of communication open. I wanted to rebuild our trust and create a healthier partnership. In the days that followed, Clara and I made a conscious effort to collaborate more closely. We worked together on marketing strategies and product development. I felt a sense of teamwork that had been missing for a long time. However, I still noticed some lingering tension. Clara occasionally made decisions without consulting me, and I felt frustrated. I reminded her of our agreement to communicate openly, but I sensed that she was still trying to assert her authority. One afternoon, I decided to address it directly. I approached Clara and explained that I felt excluded from discussions that impacted my area of responsibility. I urged her to include me in decision-making processes. Clara listened, but I could see she was defensive. She argued that she was trying to move things forward quickly. I reminded her that we had agreed to collaborate and that I needed to be part of those discussions. Our conversation became heated again. I felt my frustration rising, but I knew I had to stay calm. I wanted to find a resolution, not escalate the conflict. I urged Clara to see the value in our partnership. After a long discussion, Clara finally agreed to include me in more decision-making. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. It seemed like we were making progress, but I knew the journey was far from over. As the weeks passed, I continued to advocate for my role in the company. I wanted to ensure that my contributions were recognized and valued. I felt a renewed sense of purpose as we worked on our upcoming projects. However, I also sensed that Clara was struggling with her leadership role. I could see the pressure weighing on her, and I wanted to support her. I knew that if we worked together, we could overcome our challenges. One day, I suggested that we hold a team-building workshop. I believed it would help strengthen our collaboration and improve our communication. Clara agreed, and we began planning the event. As we prepared for the workshop, I felt hopeful. I wanted to create a positive atmosphere where everyone could share their ideas and concerns. I knew that building a strong team would benefit our company in the long run. On the day of the workshop, I arrived early to set up. Clara joined me, and we worked together to create an inviting space. I felt a sense of camaraderie as we prepared for the day ahead. The workshop was a success. We engaged in team-building exercises, shared our goals, and discussed our challenges. I could see the positive impact it had on our team. It felt like we were finally moving in the right direction. As I left the workshop, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Clara and I had taken steps to strengthen our partnership, and I was excited about the future. I knew that while challenges would arise, we were becoming stronger together. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that we were in this together. After the workshop, I felt a renewed sense of hope. Clara and I were making progress, and our team seemed more unified. But deep down, I knew we still had unresolved issues. I wanted to ensure that our partnership was built on trust and mutual respect. As I reflected on my journey, I realized I needed to consider my future. I had poured so much of myself into the company, but I also needed to protect my interests. I started thinking about the possibility of forming my own company, independent of Clara and Tom. I knew it would be a risky move, but I felt it was time to explore my options. One evening, I sat down with my laptop and began drafting a business plan. I thought about the unique product I could create and how I could market it. I wanted to build something that reflected my vision and values. The idea excited me, but it also scared me. I had to weigh the emotional toll of leaving my sister behind against my own aspirations. As I worked on my plan, I reached out to some industry contacts for advice. I wanted to gather insights on the market and potential investors. I felt a sense of empowerment as I connected with people who encouraged my ideas. But then, I received a call from Tom. He wanted to meet to discuss the company's future. I felt a knot in my stomach. I knew this conversation could change everything. I agreed to meet him, but I was unsure of what to expect. When I arrived at the office, Tom looked serious. He started by saying that Clara had expressed concerns about our partnership and the direction of the company. I felt my heart race. I wondered if Clara was feeling overwhelmed again. Tom explained that Clara was considering dissolving our partnership. I felt a wave of shock wash over me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I knew we had our challenges, but I thought we were making progress. And I asked Tom why Clara felt this way. He explained that Clara believed it would be better for both of us to pursue our own paths. I felt a mix of fear and confusion. I had worked so hard to build this company with Clara. The thought of walking away was terrifying. I took a deep breath and reminded Tom that I valued our partnership. I explained that we had both invested so much into the company, and I believed we could find a way to make it work. I wanted to address Clara's concerns directly. Tom nodded but seemed unsure. I could see he was caught between us. I suggested that we hold a meeting with Clara to discuss her feelings openly. I wanted to understand her perspective and see if we could find a solution together. He agreed, and we set a date for the meeting. In the days leading up to it, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I knew this conversation could change the course of our future. I wanted to be prepared. When the day of the meeting arrived, I walked into the office feeling nervous. Clara was already there, looking serious. I took a seat and tried to remain calm. I wanted to create a safe space for this conversation. Tom started the meeting by outlining the purpose. He explained that we were there to discuss our partnership and any concerns Clara had. I felt a sense of urgency. I needed to understand what was going on. Clara spoke first. She expressed her feelings of being overwhelmed and under pressure. She said she felt like she was carrying the weight of the company on her shoulders. I listened carefully, feeling empathy for her struggles. As she spoke, I realized that Clara was not just worried about our partnership, she was also worried about her own abilities as a leader. I wanted to support her, but I also needed her to recognize my contributions. I gently reminded her of the strengths we both brought to the table. I explained that we had faced challenges, but we were stronger together. I urged her to see the value of collaboration instead of focusing on the pressure. After a long discussion, Clara seemed to soften. She admitted that she had been feeling isolated in her role. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe we could work through this together. I suggested that we explore a new arrangement for our partnership. We could define our roles more clearly and find ways to support each other. Clara nodded, and I could see her considering the idea. As we continued to talk, I felt the tension starting to lift. We discussed ways to share responsibilities and communicate more effectively. I could see Clara beginning to feel more at ease. By the end of the meeting, we had reached an agreement. We decided to create a new partnership structure that allowed us both to thrive. Clara would take the lead on marketing, while I would focus on product development and strategy. We would check in regularly to ensure we were aligned. As I left the meeting, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. We had addressed our concerns and found a path forward. I knew we still had work to do, but I felt hopeful about our future. In the days that followed, I focused on my responsibilities while continuing to support Clara. I wanted to ensure that our partnership was built on trust and collaboration. I felt a renewed sense of purpose as we worked together. However, I still couldn't shake the thoughts of my own company. I knew that I had the potential to create something valuable on my own. I decided to keep working on my business plan in case I needed to pursue that path in the future. As I balanced both roles, I felt stronger than ever. I was ready to face any challenges that came our way. I knew that my journey was far from over, but I was determined to make it work, whether it was with Clara or on my own. The days after our agreement felt different. Clara and I were working more harmoniously, and I could feel the tension easing. We held regular check-ins, and our communication became more open. I felt hopeful about our partnership, but I also knew I had to stay vigilant. Then came the day we had been preparing for, the launch of our new product. I felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was our chance to showcase our hard work and the improvements we had made together. I wanted everything to go perfectly. As I arrived at the venue, I felt the energy in the air. Our team was buzzing with excitement, and I could see Clara coordinating everything with confidence. I felt proud of what we had accomplished. We had come a long way from the tension that almost tore us apart. The launch event started, and I watched as Clara took the stage to introduce our product. She spoke with passion and enthusiasm, and I felt a rush of pride. I was happy to see her thriving in her role. It felt like we were finally on the same team. After her speech, it was my turn to present. I took a deep breath and stepped onto the stage. I introduced our product and explained its unique features. The audience listened intently, and I felt a surge of energy. This was my moment to shine. As I spoke, I noticed Clara in the audience, smiling and nodding. It filled me with confidence. I finished my presentation to applause, and I felt relieved. We had worked hard for this moment, and it was paying off. After the presentations, we mingled with guests. I felt a sense of camaraderie with our team, and I could see the excitement on everyone's faces. Clara and I exchanged proud glances, and I felt grateful for the progress we had made together. But then, as the night continued, I noticed a shift in the atmosphere. Some guests began to ask questions about our partnership and my role in the company. I could feel the tension creeping back in. It reminded me of the challenges we had faced. Claire and I were approached by a group of potential investors. They were interested in our product, but also wanted to know more about our leadership structure. I felt a knot in my stomach. This was a crucial moment for us. As we spoke with the investors, Clara took the lead in addressing their questions. I felt a mix of pride and unease. I wanted to contribute, but I also knew that Clara was trying to assert her authority. I reminded myself to stay calm and confident. When the investors asked about my trademark ownership and how it impacted our partnership, I felt the familiar tension rise. I stepped in to explain my role, emphasizing the importance of collaboration. I wanted them to see that we were a united front. After the meeting, Clara pulled me aside. She looked concerned. She said that she felt overshadowed during the investor discussions. I could see the pressure weighing on her again. I felt a pang of empathy. I reminded her that we were in this together. I explained that our roles were complementary and it was essential for both of us to shine. I encouraged her to embrace her strengths and let me support her. I wanted her to feel confident in her position. Clara nodded, but I could see she was still struggling. I decided to take a different approach. I suggested that we hold a meeting to discuss our roles and responsibilities more clearly. This would help us avoid misunderstandings in the future. When we held the meeting, I encouraged open communication. I wanted everyone on our team to feel comfortable sharing their thoughts. I reminded them that we were stronger together, and I wanted to create an environment where everyone could contribute. As we discussed our roles, I emphasized the importance of collaboration. I wanted to ensure that Clara felt empowered in her leadership. I could see her starting to relax as our team shared their ideas and concerns. By the end of the meeting, I felt a sense of accomplishment. We had created a space for open dialogue, and I could see the positive impact it had on the team. Clara and I were working together, and I felt hopeful about our future. However, I knew I still had to address my own aspirations. I had been working on my business plan in the background, and I felt it was time to make a decision. I needed to consider whether I wanted to continue building our company with Clara or pursue my own path. I decided to have an honest conversation with Clara about my plans. I wanted her to understand that while I valued our partnership, I also needed to explore my own goals. I hoped she would be supportive. When I sat down with her, I explained my thoughts. I told her that I had considered starting my own company, but I still valued our partnership. I wanted to find a way to balance both paths. Clara listened carefully. She seemed surprised, but also understanding. She admitted that she had sensed my desire to explore new opportunities. I felt a sense of relief as we discussed our feelings openly. By the end of our conversation, Clara and I reached an agreement. We decided that we could support each other's goals while continuing to collaborate on our current venture. I felt a renewed sense of purpose as we established a plan for our partnership moving forward. As I left the meeting, I felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. I knew the path ahead would be challenging, but I was ready to embrace the future. I had learned valuable lessons about collaboration, trust, and the importance of standing up for myself. I realized that while our family ties could complicate things, they could also strengthen our bond. I was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that I had the support of my sister and the potential to build something meaningful, whether together or apart.